Good morning, everybody. It is Jim White, it's Simon Jordan, and it's Trevor Sinclair, and we are live on Talksport. As we say, we await Eddie Hearn's reaction to the Frank Warren offer of AJ getting in the ring with his man Tyson Fury. We'll see what happens. We'll see any news that comes through to us. We'll bring you fast and first right here on Talksport. Trevor, I'm afraid we've got to go in this direction because the FA is investigating a video which appears to show racist abuse being aimed at the York City player Lionel John Lewis during the match against Yeovil on Saturday in the National League. He was stepping up to take a penalty kick, and then we heard this. Well, what happened after that, I'll tell you. The penalty was saved, but this very same Lionel John Lewis went on to score the winner with 10 minutes to go. So justice was seen to be done, Trevor, in many ways, if you like. York released a statement. York City are aware of a video that contains racist chanting aimed towards one of our players at Saturday's match against Yeovil. We've reported it. They're investigating it. We're happy to leave the investigation in their hands, they being the FA. Lionel John Lewis, the player involved, the player at the receiving end of the chants, he posted on Instagram, "My first encounter with racism was on a football pitch 20 years ago. Here I am today, still at the receiving end of mindless cowards. Yeovil have said they're investigating internally. I'm not holding my breath." And a Yeovil Town Club statement said, "Yeovil can confirm we're aware of the audio which contains discriminatory chanting from Saturday's game against York, etc., etc. An internal investigation." Yeah, you can guess what they're saying. But Trevor, does it go to show that all the messaging, and if you like, the taking the knee gestures over the last few years have pretty much been pointless?
No, I think it goes right against that. I think it means that we've still got a lot of work to do. I think when you hear Lionel speak there, or when he tweeted what he tweeted about he first experienced racism 20 years ago when he first started playing football, and he's still experiencing it now, I think it's a failure on everyone as a society.
That's what I mean, which means all the campaigning's been pretty pointless.
Why has it been pointless?
Well,
because if we don't do anything,
I was getting it 20 years ago, and I'm getting it today.
If we don't do anything, nothing will happen. So, you know, we go back to 1965, 1968 when the Race Act was actually wrote, and it became a crime to racially abuse anyone. We're just dragging our feet to put it over the line and make sure that this abhorrent behaviour from people, vile people, should stop. And if it doesn't stop, in football we can manage the situation ourselves. We can ban him. We can tell his workplace what he's been up to. They can report him to the police or the people, because it wasn't just one. And there wasn't a lot of people. I've seen this video. There wasn't a lot of people behind the goal where this happened. So it must be quite easy to identify the people that were doing this, get them banned, kick them out of football. You're not wanted, and let's move on with our game and let's move on with society.
Lionel John Lewis has stressed, the player, the receiving end of it, says, "We'll kick it out ever happen. While racism is still in society,
so what do you want us to do?
It will not."
Well, what do you want us to do? Because
I
hear people say, "Oh, I'm getting sick and tired of this." Most black people have to live with this from when they can understand words until they die. So we have to continue to fight against this disease, because if we don't, this will continue. And I'm probably talking on behalf of everyone. We're going to continue to fight, and we're going to continue to fight this disease.
You've been on the receiving end.
Of course I have. I've had the monkey chance, and please God, my kids don't ever have to hear that, because they all play football. But we're failing in football. We're failing in society. We're failing because, especially in football, because we can manage and we can govern our own stadiums. Now, the Yeovil fans, for me, why would you accept that from some of your own fans? Get the stewards involved, get the names in, get them kicked out of your stadium, get them kicked out of your club. You don't want them there. And as a football authority, the FA, get on your toes and get something done about this, and get the people and the culprits who were racist to this young man and kick him out the game.
And that's what they tend to do. I mean, I don't think it's a reflection of society. I don't think you can just put it on society. I think you have to put it on the individual that chooses to behave in this fashion. And tragically, we live in a world where it's not a perfect world, and there are a very small minority of people that hold very unpalatable views. And I think football's reaction to it is as strident as it can possibly be. We don't live in a world where they're the thought police. The people that run football clubs, the people that run the FA are not thought police. They can't look into the minds of a moron. The young man that was on the receiving end has pretty much categorised it in one respect very well, and perhaps not in another. He's called them mindless cowards because that's what they are. They're mindless cowards. I can't get into the head of why somebody would want to do a monkey chant to somebody, because I wouldn't want to be able to relate to it. If I could relate to it or understand it, then it would be concerning for me about my own motivations. But to suggest that football doesn't react to it and he won't hold his breath to the Yeovil's investigations, I think is a little bit unfair, because I think football does react to it.
I agree.
It reacts stridently to it. There is no tolerance.
But you're
for
not
it.
a fan of the taking of the knee.
No, I'm not. Because my reasons
But
are very
Trevor's saying it's got to go on to eliminate stuff like this.
We're all entitled to different views, and I don't subscribe to the view that because people experience racism, that makes a country institutionally racist. I don't subscribe to that view. To have institutional racism, everything has to be weighted.
But why are we going into institutional racism? We're talking about equality, and we're talking about kicking racists out of football. That's why players take the knee.
But there aren't racists in football. There are racists on the terraces, and that's a societal issue. And what I'm suggesting is that, and this is an argument that we regularly discuss. Mm-hmm. There is racism in all communities, not just in the white community.
Absolutely.
There's racism in the black community. But if you've got 55 million people in this country that are white, and you've got 5 million that are black, even if you have 1% of both communities, you're still going to have 10 times as many racists in the white community as you do in the black, because of the nature of the makeup of this country. What you can't do is you can't tolerate it and accept it, but nobody is tolerating it and accepting it. Football isn't tolerating and accepting it. Football is suggesting and stating and reinforcing the point of view. But what happens is activists get hold of this and they start to turn everything into a prism of everything is about race. If there's no representation in the boardroom, it's because of racism. If there's no representation in the dugout, it's because of racism. And that's not necessarily true. And that's where I push back against it. I do not push back against someone's refusal to accept a mindless moron in the terraces giving a monkey chant to a player because he's black. Who would want to accept that besides a racist? There's no justification behind it, and football does not.
So let's specify it, let's look at it as one incident. How do these individuals, no matter how many of them, no matter how few of them, who threw monkey chants at this fellow Linnell John Lewis, how do we get at them, get to them, and chuck them out?
Well, first of all, in the National League, it's probably slightly more difficult than it would be in the bigger leagues because you have less resources around you and less facilities to be able to do it. But
how do we pinpoint
in the event you can do it, all the stewards have to be involved. The person has to be ejected. If they're a season ticket holder, their season ticket has to be removed. If they're a season ticket holder, they can be identified. If they can be identified, they can be reported to the police. And on we go. And I don't doubt that's what football does, because we've seen them do it. We've seen people being called out and convicted for racism. People that abused Marcus Rashford were held up and convicted of it. So there was no lackadaisical approach to this. There was a focused approach to it. Tragically, if you're going to walk down the road and 99 people are pleasant to you and one person is unpleasant, that doesn't mean you categorise the entire country as unpleasant.
No one's doing that.
No one's doing that.
But we are in a society where I listen to people all the time. I listen to Darren Lewis on Skype all the time making a case about how everything that doesn't have a representation that he feels is reflective of what he thinks should be the case, it's racism. And that's what people get a bit fed up with. This is racism. This person issuing monkey chants to this player is a racist, an imbecile, and he or she, if it's a he, should be consequenced.
You see, I think the game attracts people like this because they feel Trevor. They can stand in a little group, and they can do as they please.
And that's what we must root out.
Whether it's appropriate, inappropriate, allowable, not allowable, they think they can get away with it. Well, this is the crux of the matter. How do we stop them getting away with it?
Well, we've stopped them doing it in a lot of Premier League clubs, haven't we? Because you've got CCTV, you've got the stewarding, you've got police, you've got anti-racist charities that are pushing to kick races out of football. Now, at the top level, I think it's pretty much happening and it's happening to a high percentage. As you go down the leagues and you've got less resources, less funding, less people to police these situations, I think it can still continue.
And that is a challenge. And we're not saying it's right, but we live in an imperfect world. If people want to shout inside a football stadium and there isn't the resource at that moment in time to deal with it, it's a tragedy. But you tell me how you square that circle. You tell me how there's any tolerance in football, because I don't believe anybody can make a coherent argument for any community.
But I mentioned earlier, if you're a Yeovil fan in the vicinity of these, point these racists out to
and maybe they do, and maybe they will, and maybe people sometimes don't want to get involved in other people's businesses, and maybe it's not their job to get involved in other people's businesses.
You don't want them. Fact, this is being recorded. It's being shown on national TV. You don't want them racist fans reflecting on your club. So dig them out. Tell the stewards about it. That's true, but we mustn't also allow the uplifting of a particular individual inside a stadium, one individual or two individuals, to then allow clubs to be categorized. Well, it's a very small amount, because if you look at the video, there's hardly anybody in the bleeding ground. Yeah, so it's quite a high percentage.
But the bottom line is that if anybody wants to make a case for me and stand it up that football doesn't do everything it can, I've yet to hear it. All I hear is excuses for the reasons why representation doesn't happen, or it's this, is that. But I don't believe
different.
But it's not, because it's all part of the same package. And tragically,
we're talking about
when Linnell John Lewis, who was on the receiving end of this, gets to the stage that he's saying, "Will kick it out ever happen?" Well, racism is in society. It will not. Racism, whether we like it or not, was alive and well at York against Yeovil. It doesn't matter if it was one. It doesn't matter if it was half a dozen. I think you'll agree, Trevor. It doesn't matter if it was a dozen of them.
But no one's arguing that.
What we need is these individuals to leave that stadium, leave that ground, and go home thinking they're going to be all right, and get a knock in the door a few hours later.
Is there any evidence
from the old
Is
bill?
there any evidence that football doesn't have that same approach? Because this has been, and his response is that he doesn't hold his breath. Well, I think that's awfully disparaging of the effort that football may well take.
Well, maybe because of the 20 years that he's had to accept it.
Well,
that's why he's coming out with that rhetoric.
I think that's it.
But with respect, he hasn't had 20 years of making complaints to football clubs to investigate.
Well, no, because there was no complaints procedure before more recent times.
And how do we know that he hasn't?
But there's always been a complaints
procedure. We don't know that he hasn't.
Simon, there hasn't.
There has,
Trevor.
Trevor, sorry, mate. I owned a football club 12 years ago. I had a complaints procedure.
I played 35 years ago. This procedure has not been in place, Simon.
Well,
I assure you. Because I've tried to complain myself.
On to whom?
And it just falls on deaf ears. The door's closed. You're looked upon in a less of a light because you can't take the banter.
We'll maybe speak. I'm looking at producer Luke at the moment. We'll maybe speak to Linnell in the coming days, and we'll see if he fancies coming on, and we'll find out the level of progress or otherwise that has been made into this. And we'll see if he thinks it's satisfactory or unsatisfactory.
Well, he doesn't.
And let's hope that the individuals, if there are any of these individuals who took part in the monkey chants at this particular fixture and are listening this lunchtime, be ashamed of yourselves.